right.
Good girl, you were quiet during
Yeah,
that prayer. That was good.
but she's staring.
I know. She tries to stare me down.
All right, so we are now we have entered the land, right? Returned from the land. And how is that return, as we've looked at in Ezra, how is that described?
That's a big one.
How is the return to the land described? For what fun? Why do they have to return?
The king left them return.
Okay, they left them return because they were someplace else.
Yes,
Right.
They're in
exactly.
Babylon.
Right.
Yeah.
The waters of Babylon. How can we sing our songs in a foreign land? Well, so, but so they're and so they are returned. And why? How is that? The king, emperor of Babylon of Persia, allows him to come back. Cyrus. How is that described? How is their return to the land described?
I can't see what he's asking.
I don't understand what.
Well, you don't have to just think about it. Well, as the writer writes it, as he presents it, what feeling do we get as we get this return of the people to the land?
Joyous.
Okay, good. Yeah, it was a happy return. This was a good thing. And how are the people described that return?
How are the people described?
Yeah, which is a little, they come back joyous because they're going back home. They're going to the land that God had given them. They were returning to the promised land. How are the people who come back, from the perspective of the writer, how does he seem to see them, or how is he presenting them to the reader? In other words, how does he want us to see these people?
They celebrated?
Well, they certainly celebrate. Okay, good. How did they, what's that?
The dedication.
Okay, good. Because the celebration is important, but it's a celebration in religious terms.
Yes.
So they are a dedicated bunch, right? The people that were sent into exile, they were, pretty sad. And they were kind of a motley bunch. They were worshiping other gods and always going astray, and the kings were terrible. But the people who come back seem to be incredibly dedicated, right? Now, who's allowing them to go back? Okay, the king. Now, if we look at the way it's presented, the king, who is behind the scenes? God. God is always behind the scenes working, and we'll see that today as well. Okay, so we got the people coming back. You've got God working through these Persian kings, and we've already seen 3 of them. We've talked about 3 of them. And we've got the people who return being a dedicated group. Now, what are some of the things when they get back to the land? What are some of the things they rebuild? And I'm putting rebuild in parentheses because it may be more than just structures. What are some of the things that they rebuild? Okay, the big one we looked at last time was the temple. They rebuilt the temple. Now, why was that so important that they rebuild the temple?
So they can pray, so they can worship.
Okay, so they can worship God, right? And worshiping God means what? To worship God, what do they need to do?
Pray.
In the temple.
They need to sacrifice. Therefore, they build the temple. They also build, even before they build the temple, they build an altar because they got to sacrifice. And that's only mention that because that's the perspective of the writer. He is writing about, just like we saw in the books of the Kings, living according to God's word is worshiping God correctly. And worshiping God correctly, it means sacrificing at the temple on the altar. That's what it means.
So when they bring these 150 and so on animals, they put them each one up there and kill them.
That's what it is, like an assembly line. Boom.
And then they cook the meat.
Yep, that's what they
And then
do.
people get to eat it.
Well, the priests get to eat.
How can they eat all that?
Well, they don't eat it. Because understand that they don't eat it all. Because understand they're burning most of it.
Oh,
Most of it is being burned.
Oh.
Burned to a crisp.
those poor things.
But see, the whole idea of there's a reason why it's called sacrifice. Because slaughtering these animals have value. In the ancient world, they have a lot of value. An ox is really, really important in the ancient world. When you take an ox and slaughter it, and then burn it to ashes, you have truly made a sacrifice. You have truly given something incredibly precious to God. And that's why when we saw some of the bad kings, talking about sacrificing Manasseh, when he sacrifices his sons, that's the same idea. You are taking the most precious thing you possess and offering it to God. And offering it to God didn't mean, I'm going to give it to God, but I'm going to take it back. I'm going to give it to God, but I got plenty of it. Offering it to God is something when you offer it, you don't have it anymore. It's gone. And it is really life and death valuable. So that's what most of it is, just burned to ash.
Okay.
Others, not all of it though. Some are set aside for the priests, because the priests have no way of earning money. They have no way, they don't have farms. So they get a portion of the sacrifices that are being offered. But they don't get it all.
Oh, so they're not monetarily earning anything.
Well, understand this is sort of in a pre-monetary world. So most of it is done exchanges of goods, like barter. And so that's the advantage the priests have. So anyway, so they rebuild the temple, absolutely essential, because you can't worship God without it. What else do they sort of begin to rebuild?
Their land, their homes, their
Okay.
and stuff.
So they're sort of rebuilding their community
Yes.
in the land. Okay. What else are they rebuilding?
I don't want to say religion, but their worship.
Okay, that's right. They worship. Now, as they're rebuilding their worship, and the temple is certainly part of it. How might you rephrase that? If they're worshiping again, what is it that they're rebuilding that the people had lost during the times for the most part, during the times of the kings?
I'm sorry.
Okay, the faith. And faith is a relationship with God. So they're sort of rebuilding that. And they're doing it through the application of the law, which the people seem incredibly focused on doing. Now, as they do this, this is being driven by God. And as I've said before, really, really, really important as we look at this, understand this is coming from the perspective of the writer. I read an article this past week about historians, and that historians are always writing history from their perspective. That's why you can read two histories about the same person or same event, and it sounds like you're talking about something entirely different, because they're shaping what happened to make a point. And that's what this writer is doing. He's shaping this story to convey a message to his audience, something that he wants them to carry with him. Okay, and so far it's been a dedication, the people being dedicated to God, trying to repair so many of these things that have kind of broken down. And as we look at what's happening on the ground, are the Persians the enemy? Are the Persians in this writing, are they presented as the enemy? I mean, the Assyrians were, and the Babylonians were, but do we get the same presentation of the Persians? No. If anything, they seem to be positive, often instruments of God. So God is working through these Persians, and again, that's the perspective of the writer. That's what the writer wants us to believe as we leave the story. Okay, so we're approaching chapter 7 and we run into another Persian. Who do we see right at the beginning of chapter 7?
Ezra.
Well, even before we get to Ezra, the writer does something interesting right at the beginning. Yeah, Artaxerxes. And the king of Persia. Now, he says it's during the reign. What he's about to describe is during the reign. Now, what might that tell you about what he's about to write? If the writer says this is happening, by saying it's during the reign of Artaxerxes, and there were actually two of them, what might he be suggesting about what's to follow? What is he doing when he says this is going to happen during the reign of Artaxerxes?
Is that one of the teacher?
Okay, yeah,
Gonna
but
give you some
He's
history.
the law.
good. He's linking it to history, right? So this isn't just a story.
In the law of Moses.
Well, this is happening in a very definite time in history where you could put your finger. This is when it's happening. This is going on in the world. Sort of like when we look at the birth story of Jesus. When Luke writes about the birth story, how does he start the birth story? Well, during the reign of Caesar Augustus, when Quirinius was governor of Syria. He gives, all of those are given to date it. Now, why would a writer do that?
So you can put it in context of the
Okay,
whole thing?
you got it in context. You're also communicating that what's about to happen is probably pretty important. We don't want to just leave it vague. It's just out there, just a story. This is something that I'm grounding in history because this is really, really important. And so we've got it happening during the reign of this Persian king, which we're going to hear about later, the same guy. Now who is mentioned? What Jew is mentioned right at the beginning? We've been waiting for him to make his appearance. Ezra's finally presented. And the writer, and again, remember, whatever the writer puts in, he's putting in for a reason. He's just not throwing in random information. There's a reason he's doing it. How does he describe Ezra? What's the first thing he does to describe Ezra?
Tells who's the son of.
Okay, gives his family history, right? Mm-hmm. Which we've seen before. But as we read the family history of Ezra, some names kind of pop out at us. What are some names that, a lot of them don't mean a hill of beans to us.
Uzi?
Yeah, who cares? But we do see a few names that becomes, well, just as you look at it, names that kind of come off the page in that list that you have seen before.
Phineas.
Okay, Phineas. You see Phineas. We've seen Phineas before. You remember when we saw Phineas? Lord have mercy. We saw Phineas all the way back to Joshua. Phineas was the priest. Who else do we see?
Uriah, or say that?
Well, yeah. Have we seen him before?
No.
No, but we probably might have. I don't remember him. Maybe big stars. Phineas, I think, is one of them.
I was just going to say.
Aaron.
My goodness gracious. Yeah, who is Aaron?
Chief priest.
He's a high priest. Well, in fact, he tells us, chief priest, that he's a high priest. Who was Aaron? Moses' brother. And another one that we've seen but may not be, Zadok, is a big deal. In fact, Zadok means righteous. That's what it means in Hebrew. He was David's high
I have
priest.
a question.
Yeah.
It's not on this right here exactly, but when Aaron spoke for his brother because he stuttered, why would God put him in charge if he couldn't talk right and let Aaron sort of do it for him?
Don't know. Yeah. Don't
I thought
know.
maybe it was something I missed.
Nope. Not that I can see.
Okay.
Don't know.
Well, you'd have to ask God and then tell
Yeah,
me.
that's right. There's a lot of things I want to ask God. I'll ask him that after I ask him why tuna fish doesn't taste good with ketchup.
Ew.
Because if tuna tastes good with ketchup, you'd have a perfect food, no fat. You know, tuna, ketchup, no fat. But instead, you got to put what on tuna? Mayonnaise, which is full of fat. So this is something I want God to explain to me. That's my question. If I find out you've asked him first, you're in big trouble. I'm gonna rat you out with God. I'm gonna say, that's my question. She did it, she shouldn't have. Okay, but anyway, so we get, now why would the writer mention, because he's putting this family history that ends with, you know, big names, Eleazar, Phineas, Eleazar, and Aaron. That's pretty big stuff. Aaron was the first priest. What is he doing for us, the reader, with respect to Ezra by giving that little history?
Just kind of giving you the fact that he has a family, and that's where it comes from.
And what kind of family?
Royal family.
Yeah, pretty important family. In a sense, he's enhancing Ezra, right? He's building Ezra up, you know, saying he's the descendant of Aaron. You know, so he is in this priestly line. His role, we can expect his role to be pretty important. Now, what does Ezra do? Now, this, what we're going to be looking at today is a little confusing because we kind of go back and forth. It's not a straight narrative.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Did you not come up with everyone else from Babylon?
Yeah, well, that's right. We have one group that comes, big group, and then we'll have Ezra coming later, and then we'll have somebody else coming later after Ezra. So this is another group that's coming back, smaller, not the big bunch with Zerubbabel, who rebuilds the temple. This is a later group that comes. But even in this narrative, we're going to kind of go back and forth. Okay, so he is leaving from, where is he departing from?
Who, Ezra?
Yeah, Ezra. Okay, he's leaving Babylon, which means Ezra was exile, part of the exile community. And the writer tells us that Ezra has an expertise, right? What does Ezra know really well? Well, one, we know he's a priest because he's in the family of Aaron and Zadok, and that puts him in a priestly line. What else does the writer tell us?
He was well versed in the law of Moses.
Yeah.
He knows the law of Moses. Now, based on how we've seen the law of Moses, and again, the perspective of the writer, what aspect of the law of Moses would we expect Ezra to be well versed on?
The laws.
Laws,
What part of the law? Because there's a lot of laws in there.
the worship.
Of Israel.
Yes, the worship, he's going to be well versed. We'd expect him to be well versed in worship law. There's a lot of other law about how you should treat one another. That hasn't ever come up in the book of Ezra. Now file that away, because next week the community's going to face a crisis that will have, when you read it, you say, oh man, that sounds horrible that this was a decision made. But not if you're looking at purity, worship purity. It doesn't, and that's the perspective of the writer. You know, how you treat your neighbor is not nearly as important as how you worship your God. That's what he's emphasizing. And doesn't eliminate the other, just shows us that this writer, that's where his focus is. Okay, so Ezra knows, he knows the law. What else do we know about him? What else does the writer tell us about him? He knows the law. What else? What's his relationship with the king?
Good.
Good. In fact, the king does what?
Gives him everything.
Gives him what he asks. Grants him what he asks. Now we say, oh, isn't that wonderful of the king? Oh, boy, that king is a great guy. Right? Ooh, nice. But why does the king give him everything he wants?
Because God is in charge.
The hand of God is on him. So, yeah, the king does it because who's in charge?
God.
Yeah, it ain't the king. It is ultimately God. And so we've got Ezra here. The writer has presented him. We know who he is. Important figure. He's heading back, right? But he's not going back alone. Who went back with him?
Priests, Levites.
Okay, we
Keepers.
got priests, we got Levites, we got
Singers.
singers, we got gatekeepers, we got,
A little bit of everything.
Servants.
well, a little bit of everything, but all of them are related. What are they all related to? The people that are coming back.
And it would still be about worship.
Yes, they're all related to temple worship. He didn't say, oh, some of them were farmers,
Yeah.
some of them were business people. Doesn't say that. Some were royalty. It's all of the people that are returning with Ezra are related to temple worship. What have they just done in Jerusalem? Before Ezra built the temple. So Ezra's coming back with a staff, right? So Ezra is coming back with people to staff the temple. Okay. And again, the writer tells us when it happened. Why again would he tell us? Why would he date it?
Why would he do
Why would the writer give us a date? Why do kids have to memorize 1776?
So they remember.
Yeah, so because it's a really an important thing. It's important. Why would he date it? Because this for the future is really, really important when these people come back. Now we got a little shift in verse 9. What is the shift we see in a little shift in verse 9? Because like I told you, this is a little confusing because we kind of go back and forth. So he's sort of given us a summary of what happens. What does he do beginning in verse 9?
He tells them when he started his journey.
Okay, he goes back like, I've given you a summary, now let me give you some details. Now what's interesting, he's going to do it again later in what we're looking at. But the shift is even more dramatic. So again, he's talking about starting the journey, right? Mm-hmm. Ezra and all these people that end up getting there in the 5th month, they're starting their journey. And what, of course, enables them to do their journey, to start their journey?
Because God wanted.
God is with them, right? And why is God's hand on them?
Because that's who he
Because
wants.
of the chosen people.
Well, chosen people, why is his hand on Ezra in particular? Yeah.
Because isn't he in the line of David?
Well, he is. What does the writer say in verse 10?
He devoted himself to the study of the law of the Lord.
Okay, he was an expert at the law of the Lord, and he's going to teach Israel. So right here where the writer tells us what Ezra is going to do, right?
Yes, teaching.
He knows the law and he's going to teach the law when he gets there, right? Okay, now as he starts, and again we're going to have to go through this again from another perspective. He's carrying something with him. What does he have in his hands?
Copy of the letter of King.
He's got a copy of Artaxerxes, a letter that he's given to the priest Ezra. And in this, how is Ezra, even before the letter? See, you look for little things like that. Even before he talks about what's in the letter, how is Ezra described?
He's a priest and a teacher.
Okay, he's a teacher. What else? He's called, in verse 11, he's called a scribe. Now, why would a scribe? What is a scribe?
I don't have it in my scribe.
What's that?
He writes.
A scribe writes. Why is that really an important job religiously? Why would that be an important religious job? And why would it be so tied to being a scholar on the law?
Because
a scribe writes.
Yeah, but not everybody can write, not everybody can read, but this would be a record of their history.
Okay, not everybody can write. Why can't more people read and
Because
write?
paper is...
Because you're writing on skins of reeds. So paper is and what scribes did was they could write in really small, little tiny letters they could write. So you could do what?
Get a lot on
Get a lot on
a
the
piece of paper.
page. You look at the notes I take. You
Yeah,
guys
that's what I said.
can squeeze all kinds of notes because they write really small. And that's what a scribe did. And scribes, so they wrote very, very small. When you look at the New Testament, the papyrus on which the New Testament, the ancient, it's just lines of letters. They don't even divide words. No punctuation, no division of words, just lines of letters. That's it. Well, you look at lines of letters,
Yeah.
even if you could read it, this isn't very helpful because no words are divided. And so scribes were sort of like people that can decode Morse code. They could tell where the words should be divided. And so you needed a scribe to write it. You also needed a scribe to decipher it and read it, because most people couldn't read anyway because there was nothing to read. So the scribes became really important, and since they copied it and read it, they knew it. So not only was Ezra a priest, but Ezra was also a scribe, which means he knew the law. Okay, so he's got a letter. And the writer wants us to see him as a scribe, as a scholar in the commandments. Now, how does the letter begin? Because he's going to give us the text of the letter.
It says, Ezra the priest, a teacher of the law of God of heaven.
Okay, good. He identifies the writer, Artaxerxes, but he also identifies Ezra. And Ezra is a priest and a scribe. What does he call the God that Ezra serves, the one that Ezra serves?
God of heaven.
God of heaven. Now we've seen that before. Why is it significant that in this letter, the king of Persia, and understand, the king of Persia controls everything from the Nile River in Egypt to the Indus River in India. I mean, the largest empire the world has ever seen to that point. So he is literally king of the world, king of everything worth ruling. Why is it significant that he calls Ezra a scribe of the law of the God of heaven? Why is that so significant that the king of Persia says this?
It's the fact that he recognizes
Okay,
that.
good. We've got the king recognizes the authority of. Now he's Persian. He's got his gods. Mm-hmm. They got all kinds of Persian gods. He's the ruler of the world. There are a lot of gods floating around the Persian Empire. But this is the God of heaven. So again, as the writer is shaping this story, Jerusalem is just on the fringe of this empire. They are certainly not in the middle, but their God is the Lord God of heaven, that's a powerful, powerful statement that I think the writer is reminding the audience that our God is not only powerful, but even recognized by others, great, and sort of the ultimate others. Okay, so he issues this letter is a decree, right? That these folks that are going back to Jerusalem are carrying. And what is Ezra, according to the letter, what is Ezra's purpose in going? Why is Ezra and this bunch with him going?
Investigate the conditions in Jerusalem.
Okay, going to look at the conditions in Jerusalem. What else are they doing?
Taking silver and gold.
Okay, they're taking silver and gold. Now, why is all of this? Because he says he's a scribe of the God of heaven. Why is this so important to the God of Israel? Why are the things that Ezra
Taken out of his temple.
Okay, they're returning to.
Yeah, they're returning everything back.
And remember, we saw that before.
Yeah.
That these vessels that the Babylonians had taken, they're going back to where they came from, where they belong, in this temple that has now been was destroyed and now has been rebuilt. Right. So he's carrying all of this. And where does this God of Israel dwell? He dwells in Jerusalem. And what gold and silver are they bringing? What is this gold and silver they're bringing?
From the temple.
They're from the temple, and what are they going to do with it?
Put it back in.
They're going to put it back, right? And what can they? But evidently they're carrying other things, gold and silver. What about the other gold and silver they're carrying? So some of them are the utensils, the basins, the bowls and stuff that'll go back to the temple to be used in worship, right? But there's other stuff they carry.
Like the animals, bulls and rams.
Okay, you've got other money, right? And what can they do with this other money? With this other gold and silver that they carry?
To buy the animals.
You can use it to buy the animals, you can use it to buy, what's that?
Yeah.
Grain, you can use it to buy other utensils,
They got
vessels.
salt. Didn't they take salt?
Well, we'll get to salt.
Oh.
Because, yeah, you're right, salt is going to be important. So this is what they're carrying, right? Mm-hmm. And what if they need more? What if they need more than they're carrying? This is a letter that Artaxerxes gives.
He's ordered if Ezra needs anything else at all the other.
Take it out of petty cash. Take it out of the king's treasury.
And
Yeah.
pay the workers who were building it too.
Yeah, that was
That's
before.
before,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So, but if you don't have enough, we'll foot the bill. We'll foot the bill. Okay, part of this is Ezra, what he's doing. Now, what's the command he offers to the other governors, the surrounding governors?
To provide with diligence whatever Ezra the priest, a teacher of the law of God of heaven, may ask of you.
Which is what we saw before with this, when Darius, when they went and the other people around told on, when they were rebuilding the temple, and Darius sent the same sort of letter saying, leave them alone. In fact, if they need your help, you got to help them. Right here, what is the king saying?
To give him whatever he needs.
If he needs it, give it to him. Give it to him. Now, this is wonderful that Artaxerxes is doing this, but even in this letter, who is in control? God is. Even in the letter it says God is in control, right? And what if what else are they not supposed to do to Levites and priests?
Those taxes.
Don't tax them. You're not supposed to tax them. Now, what is the writer then telling us? Because he's writing all this stuff down. He's doing it for a reason. What does he want his audience? What does he want us to take away from this letter that Artaxerxes has given Ezra to take? What does he want us to think? What does he want us to feel?
That God is behind it all.
Okay.
Because it says here, God of heaven has prescribed, let it be done.
Okay. This is what God is again pushing this narrative. And what does he say to Ezra? So he says, this is what Ezra is going back to do, right? First, this is what I want my other governors, the people who work for me, to do. Now he addresses Ezra.
To appoint magistrates and judges to administer justice.
In essence, then, what has he been commanded to do?
Creating government.
He's creating a government. He's creating a community. And he is descendant of David. He's a descendant of Aaron.
Yeah.
He's a priest. He's not Davidic. So the kind of state he's establishing is what? David would establish a political state that's religious. What is Ezra establishing? A religious state that may be political. But the focus is on religion. Because he's the one that has the authority to appoint.
It said, when he puts in here, whoever does not obey the law of your God and the law of the king must surely be punished. But since the king has his own laws, right? And he's making up Ezra the laws for his people. So whose law are they supposed to obey first?
As you read this, what impression do we have on which law is most important?
Well, God's is. Of course.
Okay, yeah. That's even in that line you read, when he talks about the law of God and the law of king, which one does he give first? Which one does he offer first? The law of God. So even in the way it's phrased in the letter, the law of God is more important. So Artaxerxes would seem to be what? How is he functioning with this letter?
He's the authority.
Yeah, he is almost, it's functioning as like a representative of God. God is working through him to establish what's happening here. And what does this enable? So we've got it, and what's the problem? What's the consequence of not doing this? What consequence does?
Banishment.
Okay, bad stuff.
Yeah, stuff, confiscation.
That's right. You're gonna lose your stuff. You're gonna lose your home. You're gonna be banished. Bad things are gonna happen. So Ezra's going back to reestablish this religious worship. And this is really different than we've seen in other. This isn't a Davidic kingdom anymore. This is a religious state that's centered where? Around the temple and around worship. So this is really different. Again, a different perspective. There are going to be other people that are writing from a more Davidic side, establishing the Davidic kingdom. You're not going to hear talk about Messiah in here. Because Messiah is kind of a political role. It's not a religious role. Messiah is a descendant of David, who was a descendant of Judah. This is not messianic. This is priestly. So we're establishing a priestly state because that's the perspective of the writer. That's the goal. Now, we've got a really significant shift happening in verse 27. What is the shift that we see occurring in 27?
Bringing honor
Now,
to the
look
house of the
look
Lord.
at it really carefully. It is a significant shift in what we've read.
The Lord made it king.
Yeah.
But it's put me
Well,
to their-
that's that excellent point. We've kind of seen that working. I'm thinking of a shift in how it's written.
Bringing honor to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem.
That's true.
Ezra taught.
Yes, we shift to Ezra talking because it's now first person. It's not third person anymore. Not talking about them and they. Ezra, beginning in verse 27, is talking, and that's why we're going to end up going back. We've got him going once in a summary, and then we got him coming back with this letter from Artaxerxes going forward, and now we're going to do what? We're going to go back again, because now this is Ezra. Now, why would the writer do this? Because remember, this is after, he's not, a reporter writing stuff down. He's writing this later to people who are living later to teach them some lessons that you could glean from the past. Why might he shift from third person to first person?
Because that's what God
To show that he was there.
Okay, that it establishes that. Now, if he wants to establish that Ezra, because when it's first person, all of a sudden what you're looking at is an eyewitness. You're not writing, it's not somebody writing about something, that they didn't experience themselves. You're talking about somebody writing about something that they did experience because they were there. So it sort of enhances the importance of what's going on. Don't take my word for it. Take Ezra's word for it, because he's the one writing it. We see the same thing happen in the New Testament, in the book of Acts. We see it happen 3 times in the book of Acts. When Luke, the evangelist Luke, is writing Acts, and it's third person, they, he, she, it, on and on and on. And all of a sudden, boom, he shifts to first person, I. 3 times he does it, I. And then he'll go out of it, and then we back to third person. Each time when you look at it, it would make that these are important things that Luke wants us to really, really believe. For Luke and his preaching, this is something that don't take the word of a narrator. Take my word for it. I was there. Really interesting. But again, we're talking about writers who are trying to convey messages. So here we shift to Ezra speaking in first person. And as Ezra starts his little first person thing, he starts by giving credit to whom? In verse 27. Okay, boom, God. He's got this letter from Artaxerxes, but it is not him that he gives credit to. He gives credit to God. And what does, reinforces things that we already know about Ezra, because we've got a background, but this is now coming from his own mouth. What did this enable Ezra to do? What did this awareness or intervention?
As a leader.
Okay, he's established as a leader. How does he describe it himself? As he's talked about how God has done this and how he's moved the heart of the king, and he's going back. What has that enabled Ezra to do?
Since he gathered leaders from Israel to walk with me.
Okay, now I've got the courage to do what? To go. The king wrote this, but he wasn't writing it by himself. It was the God of Israel that was behind it. And that's given me the courage to gather up the people and to go. And right at the beginning of chapter 8, who are the people he's gathering up? Now understand, this is still Ezra talking. We're not shifting back to third person. This is Ezra talking. What do we see right at the beginning of chapter 8?
Family heads that are registered.
Do you see any names that look familiar in there?
King.
I'll give you a hint. Not many. If you do, bless your heart. Now, why would all these names be mentioned? Because there's a bunch of names.
I didn't read them all, I have to tell you, but it's because it's family, like history family.
Okay. Clearly it must have meant something to the people reading this, receiving it about family. I don't know. But there's a lot of detailed names and relationships. One of the things, too, to file back in, and now I'm really thinking out loud, one of the characteristics we see in priestly writing, and in fact that's one way you can kind of identify it, is the priests are really big on names. They are really big on names and details. Man, if you go through the books of the Chronicles, which is the same thing, the 2 books of the Chronicles are the same thing as the books of Samuel and books of Kings. Same history, same story, from a different perspective. That's from a more priestly perspective. Man, you're gonna go nuts with names. There are names everywhere.
I don't think I would never remember.
Yeah, well, but the priests they're like bean counters.
Yeah.
It's really important to get this information down. We see it in Genesis. That's when you can tell in Genesis, when you shift from this flowing narrative, this wonderful flowing story, and all of a sudden, so-and-so begot so-and-so.
Yeah.
So-and-so begot so-and-so. And you go, oh my gosh, how many begotten are we going to go through? This breaks the whole spirit of the work. Well, in a sense it did, but the priest believed it was important to have Daniel, because it was important to know this background. Okay, so all these names are mentioned. Must be meaningful to the audience, must be meaningful to the writer. It ain't meaningful to me. I don't know what they are. Now, according to verse 15, we got all these people, right, and families, but we've got some folks that are missing. We got no Levites. Now, I know I didn't see it, but I imagine y'all did. As you studied on those names, y'all noticed that there were no, Shelley, you saw there were no Levites in there, right?
No, yeah.
Yeah, all right. I'm sorry I didn't pick up on it. But Ezra did. And he looks around and there's no Levites. Now, why is that important, that there's no descendants of Levi among them? Well, you got nobody to work the temple. You got nobody to do what they are supposed to do. So what does Ezra do before they leave town? And it says he's at Ahava. And Ahava is just north of Babylon. So it's still in Mesopotamia. He's still really close. It's on the Euphrates River. Really close to Babylon. So he hasn't left yet when he's doing this. What does he then do? When he notices in this group that he's going with him, he notices, oops, there's no Levites here. What then does he do?
He sent for some.
He gets some Levites, right? He checks the yellow pages and finds where you can order Levites.
Picked up a cell phone and said.
Picks up a cell phone. See, the fact that I talked about yellow pages, that really dates me, doesn't it? I should have said he Googled Levites. Or he went to Amazon. That would be better.
Yeah.
But I still do. I saw a video yesterday about sounds. I want sounds that kids may no longer hear.
Like telephone ringing, regular telephone.
But what they were saying is in a rotary dial,
Yes.
that clicks when it goes back. The kids
Well,
won't hear that.
They had it on TV, a movie the other day, and one of these kids come up and there was on a telephone booth, and they asked what it was.
Of course.
Yeah,
Had no idea
and
what.
they
Yeah.
it's just so interesting. I think that's interesting. And kids will still talk about hanging up the phone, but it has absolutely no meaning
Yeah.
because we don't hang up the phone anymore. There's no phone to hang up. You hit a button. And so anyway, so he gets himself some Levites. So this is a lot of space. And space is expensive. Why is the writer dedicating so much space to this little story? Who's coming back and who wasn't there and who's he got to get? Why would the writer include this? Feel this is so important, I'm going to include this in my work. What do you think?
Is it because they were taken away before and now they're coming back?
Okay, good. Let's develop that a little bit. They're coming back. Who's coming back? The Israel. And what kind of people are they? This group is being led by Ezra. What kind of people are the ones coming back? Would we expect, when we were in the book of Kings, if we had people moving around, would we expect them to worry about the fact that they had no Levites?
No.
Why would we not expect that? They were a pretty seedy bunch, right?
Yeah, I was going to say they didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, even the good ones allowed people to worship other gods. Good kings. We wouldn't expect that. Here, they're really concerned that they can't leave Babylon unless they bring Levites with them. Because God says Levites should maintain the temple. So we're talking about not only a dedicated person, but we're talking about a dedicated people. Okay. Who recognize that God is almighty to be served. Okay, now, so he gets himself his Levites. He's still not ready to leave home, right? Because he's still close to Babylon at Ahava. What does, again, first person, this is Ezra talking. What does Ezra decide to do in verse 21 before he leaves?
Fast.
What's that?
Proclaim a fast.
He proclaims a fast. And what's a fast?
You don't eat.
You don't eat. Okay. Or you don't eat, don't drink. You dedicate yourself. And why? Why is he declaring, and this is from his own words, why is he declaring a fast?
So they have a safe journey.
So that they have a safe journey. Now again, would we have expected that before? No. We didn't seem to have, kings weren't worried about fasting to have safe journeys, but these people are,
Asking.
Dedicated.
yeah, really, really dedicated. So they are not going to move until they fast. And why doesn't he, and why would they be concerned about having a safe journey?
Because of the bad people, robbers, different things like that.
They're traveling over a lot of, they're covering a lot of space, to get from where they are to where they're going. And it's not a straight line, because a straight line is going to take them through a desert. So they ain't going to take a straight line. They're going to have to go around. They're going to have to go around the desert. Well, why don't they just, Artaxerxes will give him anything he wants.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he just ask Artaxerxes for protection?
He was ashamed to ask for any more,
Why?
because he'd been given so much already.
We've given a lot already. Why else?
They said God would be with them.
Yes.
He said, our God will protect us.
Yes.
And asking for help would demonstrate what?
Your faith.
Lack of faith.
Lack of faith. Would demonstrate that maybe he didn't believe his God was strong enough to protect him. So not only was it he didn't want to sort of push Artaxerxes, but, the witness to the God Almighty, the God of heaven, would be jeopardized if he said, well, I need soldiers because God can't protect us. God isn't going to be able to protect us. Okay, so they fast and they petition God for that, pray to God. What else does he do before he leaves home?
About weighing out the money.
Okay, he weighs out money. And what is he doing when he's weighing out money? What is occurring when he weighs out money?
It's the money that was donated for the house of God.
Okay, remember in the letter it says, I'm sending Ezra and these people back with gold and silver, right? Mm-hmm. For the house of
God.
For the house of God. What is Ezra? So this we would expect them to have gold and silver. Why is Ezra weighing it? What is he doing with this gold and silver?
Paying people.
Well, what does it seem like he's doing?
Like he's going to take it with him.
Okay, it sounds like he's taking it with him, right? Mm-hmm. But he's not taking it all together, right? What is he doing with it?
It's going to be a free will offering to the Lord.
Yeah, but he's dividing it before they start going. So it's not just in one place, right? He divides it among these other people, but the other people ought to carry it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what would be the advantage of doing this kind of thing, dividing it up instead of keeping it all together? What would be an advantage to do that? A practical advantage.
Well, it's not all in one place.
Yeah. It's not all in one place. That might be a bad idea to have all your money in one place, because bad things can happen. So you divide it up. But he's dividing it up with the understanding that everybody who's receiving it is doing what? Going to do what with it? Take it to Jerusalem and offer it to the temple. So they're not kind of pocketing the money. Okay. So he divides that all up, and then no, he's still at home, right? Then they start, right? And how does Ezra describe the journey? And like I said, it is a long journey. How does Ezra describe it? That's it. I mean, it's not like the people of Israel going through the wilderness. He doesn't give a blow-by-blow description of the journey. The only thing he says is we started, we arrived, and
Weighed out all the gold and silver.
the Lord was with us the whole way. The Lord was with us the whole way. Therefore, they really didn't need Persian soldiers anyway, because the Lord God enabled them to go. And what happens when they arrive in Jerusalem, this new group? Because understand, there are other people in Jerusalem, Jews. They got a new temple. What do this second wave of exiles. What do they do when they get to Jerusalem? Okay, they rest for 3 days. 3 is a good number, holy number. And after 3 days, what do they do on the 4th day?
They have to go with silver.
Okay, they weigh out the gold and silver, and they
Give it to the priest.
give it to the priest. So it goes to the temple. Now, when we look at 35, and this is all Ezra, when we look at 35, how do we have another shift in 35 in the way it's written?
Back to 30.
Now we're back to third person. So Ezra has described the journey, which clearly in Ezra's description, what was important wasn't the journey. Ezra really doesn't focus on the journey. What does Ezra focus on?
God.
Well, he certainly focuses on God. He focuses on what happens at the very beginning. You know, the fasting and that's where Ezra puts his emphasis, not them, you know, the difficulties on the trip. You know, it's the preparation, the dedication involved in preparing for the trip. Now, but we've got a shift. And as a community, because we're not talking just about Ezra anymore by himself, because we're back to third person. As a community, what do the returning exiles do?
Sacrifice.
They start sacrificing. And what do they sacrifice?
Oxen.
Man,
Lambs,
they are sacrificing
Bulls, rams,
all kinds of stuff.
male lambs.
All kinds of stuff.
goats.
Yep.
What's SATRAPS mean?
They were Persian, they were Persian officials.
Oh,
Yeah. That's not necessarily governors, although governors would probably be included in this, but it was broader. So they were people who were on the Persian payroll.
okay.
Okay? They were representatives of the
Okay.
king. And so what else do they do? Not only do they start sacrificing, they
delivered the king's orders to the royal.
which we just read,
Yeah.
you know, in Artaxerxes' letters. And what is absolutely amazing is when they deliver these instructions to the king, the authorities. How do the authorities respond?
He gave assistance
gave
to
assistance.
people into the house of God.
They support what's happening at the house of God. Now,
You could have lunch.
in all of this, that's right, we got cheese, and we can't mess around today, so we're going to be eating it right away, because we're going out.
Oh.
Yes, we're going out. She's going home. I'm going out.
He's sending you home by yourself.
Yes. She'll have to deal with it by herself. All right. So throughout this whole story, though, what do we have? Who is really who's the focus? God, as always. This is God's story, and God is working through these people. We also have, you know, people here that are really, really dedicated. And I think I mentioned it last week. If we look at the narrative, they're much more like the people during the time of Joshua than the people during the time of Judges or Samuel, books of Samuel or Kings. You know, this is a really dedicated, focused, united people. The focus here, though, is focused on God, but what aspect of God? Focused on worshiping God. That's where we've got the focus. Now, I think we can take that and apply it to other areas, because other writers focus on other aspects of God. But here it's worshiping God the way God wants to be worshipped. Now, by the time we get to chapter 8, what are some of the significant things that we've seen happen with the people who've returned? What have been some significant things that we have already covered in Ezra?
Them all coming together.
Okay, we got people coming together, coming home, coming together,
Worshiping.
worshiping. What else do we have? What else has happened since we started Ezra?
A lot.
Yeah. Well, what? Rebuilt the temple.
The temple, yeah.
The temple is
altar.
rebuilt.
And the altar and
Yeah, the law is returned, and Ezra kind of a prime example because he's an expert in the law. And remember, he was going there to do what?
Teach.
To teach the law to the priests in the temple. So we've got that returning.
Sacrifices.
And sacrifices are being performed. We do have we have one big loose end. Remember Jerusalem, when the Babylonians take Jerusalem, not only do they tear down the temple,
You turn on the wall.
they tear down the wall. And why is that a big deal? That the wall has been torn down. Protection. If you got no wall, you got no protection. And if you got no protection, you're going to be
Invaded and.
you're going to be attacked. Now, again, like we saw in the books of the Kings, Samuel and Kings, we're talking an ancient world where we've got often just marauding armies, and so an unprotected city is prime. It's like a bank vault that can't be locked. You can't protect it. So they're going to have to do something with the wall, or all of this is moot because the Moabites are going to come and take this stuff, or the Edomites are going to come and take this, because there's nothing stopping them. Okay, so that's going to have to be. But before we get to that, and that's going to be the focus of the book of Nehemiah, is rebuilding that wall. The community with Ezra is going to face a crisis. And next week we're going to look at chapters 9 and 10 of Ezra. And we're going to see how Ezra and the people resolve the crisis. When you read it, you got to read it in context. Understand what the writer considers important. I'm not sure, probably never a good idea to do this anyway. I don't think you could take what is written in Ezra and say, oh, well, that's what Ezra says. Let's apply it verbatim to the world now, because I don't think you can do that. You'll see when you read it. If anything, it makes you a little uncomfortable, what Ezra tells people to do. And would seem to violate what Jesus and Paul told people to do later.
Yeah.
But Ezra's going to do it, but it makes sense if you're talking about a worshiping community.
You're going to eat lunch.
Okay, let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you so much for giving us this time together. Remind us that Ezra is this wonderful story of dedication to you. And he was dedicated to worshiping you in the right way. And he recognized your authority, and he was open to your guidance. Help us do the same thing in our life. Help us to be open to your word and your guidance, and help us to trust you as we go about our living. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Amen. Good.
You're going to have lunch, baby.